Cool. All right. So I think we're already live on Facebook. We're here, Luz and David, at Evolving Education. We're right now in Spain, in my childhood bedroom. Actually, it might look a little bit like that if you look through the details. It's actually wonderful to come back home and find that your family is still having erased your bedroom from it. There are just small things changing. And clothes that definitely have been there for a really long time and don't fit you anymore. But well, that's how things happen. And today we're with Rosina and Zach. Who are going to tell us about Biophilic Education and the work that they're doing at Da Vinci Life Skills. We met them a while ago actually through a recommendation from one of our common friends, Derry Hannam, who is a big advocate of democratic education, and which it's all about youth empowerment and putting learning in the hands of the learners, which I think is something that we share in terms of how we see education moving forward. And they're joining us right now from Cambridge and Bali, in the case of Zach. Really exotic locations, both of them very green for different reasons. And yeah, so looking forward to get to know you more, what brought you to education, and maybe that's a good way to start. Do you want to say something? Sorry, I start talking and...
You do it really well.
Okay. So maybe we can start with some short introductions, if you like.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I'm Rosina. I live in Cambridge in the UK, as you said, and Zach and I have founded a company called Da Vinci Life Skills, and we've built a curriculum and assessment model that is a vision for the future of how the curriculum could be taught and assessed. And the idea being, what would education look like if it were ethical, sustainable, and inclusive, or at least more of those things. I'm sure that whoever's doing it now was hoping that it would be ethical, sustainable, and inclusive. We're just finding that in a lot of cases it isn't quite, and so we're just trying to make it more of those things. I got into education. I'm a design technology teacher and an art teacher. I've been teaching for the last 20 years. In fact, I started out being a yoga teacher back in my 20s. And I got into teaching because of I just found that the system for me really shut down my creative energy. And even though I wanted to be an artist and be an art teacher, I kept feeling that I was being told what I couldn't do and what I wasn't good at. And I wasn't good at drawing, or I wasn't good at this. And I kept feeling that I was being shut down, and it wasn't really. And even though I went on to art school and did three-dimensional design as a degree, I felt very afraid of being creative and being an artist. And I did Michelle Cassu's course in California on 0.0 painting, and it completely blew my mind in the sense that she reopened the door to my creative flow. And so I started teaching her method. I did her teacher training course and then started teaching her method in schools all over the UK. And I started running that and teaching it for Cornwall College, teaching it to adults, started running retreats and connecting it with 5 rhythms and all sorts of ways of helping people of all ages get back their creative right. And so it kind of came from there, that whole feeling of, and so when Ken Robinson did his talk, was it 15 years ago now, about does school kill creativity? I was just like, well, that's a pretty good title. And I just found his talk was like a call of action to people around the world. And it's now the most emailed and watched TED talk of all time. And what he said in it was basically, I was like, okay, I'll join your army and I will become one of the people that makes a difference in education and to change it. And so since I saw that, I've been on that mission, I think. Yeah. So, and luckily I met Zach. I went to Bali, and I went to the Green School in Bali and saw the amazing things that were happening at Green School. And I was like, wow, education could look really different. And so Zach and I met. He used to teach at Green School, and you can speak with him now and hear his story. But we met there and just started getting really excited about designing a new system, and all the work he's doing with Teacher Gamer is so exciting that I was just like, yes, let's work together and build a really new, exciting vision. So I'll let Zach go now.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Rosina. Yeah, my I think my journey to education probably started when I was actually a kid and had many questions about how I was being taught, how I learned, how I was being presented with different materials. And of course, the question that we always still hear kids ask, will I really need to know this? Is this really important? How will I apply this? And these were questions that I had and I struggled with, and I also struggled with, feeling ready and feeling confident. And so I think fast forward after my own search around life and what life had to offer, and what it's like to try to make it in the world as an adult. When I finally found somebody that I loved so much that I thought that we could have a family, somewhere in that situation, it was about moving the life that I was trying a lot of different things, including I got a degree originally in design, and then I was involved in music and production. But music and production studio hours are quite long. And when the idea of having children came, I was thinking, well, how can I be, or actually meditating on the idea of how can I be best with my children and my family? And it was really around, well, what kind of things could I be involved in my community and beyond that would put me in touch with what my children need. And all those questions that I had as a child were kind of re-emerging for me. And so the idea of going back into education and learning about how things are, I never really thought that's what I would be involved in, but it suddenly, as a parent, it had a whole existential idea, or even crisis, like where am I going to take my kids and how are they going to be raised? What can I do to make a difference? And so I got an education. I got into education in that way, and then as I became a certified teacher, and as I started going into teaching, all my questions for my professors were, how are you guys coming up with these ideas, and why do you ask these questions, and how is this curriculum work? And so then my teacher was saying, maybe you should think about doing more in education. Maybe you should do a master's or a graduate program. And they encouraged me. So I ended up doing my master's at Concordia University in Montreal, and I proposed many different theses, and it was not my proposals were not accepted until my 7th proposal. And really, when they asked me, when it comes down to it, what is it that you really want to study? What is it that you really want to learn? And I was so interested in adult readiness. How do we get kids ready? Do we really have an authentic curriculum that's presenting a way for kids to understand who they are? So when they become an adult, they feel ready for the world and they have the confidence to make choices. And they're not just making choices that their parents think is a good idea, and is not an idea that society thinks is a good idea for them, but where they can be empowered to make a decision from their heart and from their own mind and their own reasoning around what they want to do in life. That this idea of authenticity, what is an authentic curriculum? So that's where I found myself, is like trying to understand motivation, and so eventually it became about teacher training. It became about high school teaching, and I was working in Canada at the English Montreal School Board. And eventually one of the students there did a video of me, how I was bringing mindfulness into classes and giving kids more and more perspective around what they felt and what they understood about themselves and what they understood about the world. And one of them made a video about that, and that I sent to green school. And for my family, it was about trying to figure out, what we were going to do next in our lives that was going to be challenging and interesting for our family. And so I got hired at green school and moved out to Bali, out here, where we're in our 8th year. And through that whole journey, realizing eventually it kind of brought me back to what I really was inspired by as a child. And it was role-playing games was one of the central things for me, because it was about exploring my identity. And so I never really thought that that's where I would go with all of this, but authentically speaking, that was something that deeply interested in me. And although there were bits and pieces of it in English and media studies and literature studies, and even theater and design and art, all those things kind of came together in playing very robust games that took into account risk and took into account identity and took into account trying things and failing. And so Teacher Gamer kind of came out of that. And in the midst of that, I met Rosina, and I published the Teacher Gamer Handbook November of last year. And it took years to kind of accomplish that goal. It was quite a feat for me. And it was right around that time of thinking, how do you put this idea around bringing role-playing games into schools into a curriculum? And for me, it's not about replacing anything. It was more about complementing, how could you integrate it into a curriculum? And there was so much, let's say, into a curriculum philosophy and into an actual curriculum. And so with all the encouragement of Rosina and other teachers and other administrators and schools, that everything is just kind of crystallized into a place that we talk about, but is a lot of, it's almost too often made into an elective. And so we've started to look at what it's like to put life skills at the center of the curriculum and have academia support it.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, and I think it touches one of the key points or key kind of keywords that is out there, these 21st century skills that everyone is talking about, that you can hear from, all the governments, all the advisors in education, the European Union, everyone is talking about, we need to develop these skills. But when we talk with teachers in public schools, in any school, they always tell us, or in many schools, they tell us, yes, those are kind of add-ons to a pretty rigid structure of contents that's already there, and which it hasn't changed that much a long time, and then it becomes something really hard to really accomplish. And it's more about kind of ticking a box of, yes, they are doing something creative because they have used PowerPoint. There you go.
But it's I guess that the main challenge is that's what we have seen through our lives, right? Yeah. We haven't seen any other model or any other way of teaching and learning. So we tend to imitate what we see, and that way it becomes really difficult to turn everything upside down and focus on those essential skills. But maybe we don't realize how important they are. And maybe we have idealized that concept of curriculum, that, this is super important, but well, we don't know if kids are actually learning those things really well, but the essential part of learning those skills are being forgotten. And you were saying it before, I was writing about making mistakes and creativity. That's so essential to make mistakes in order to learn. Like, I think that for me was a big realization when failure was something good. It was wow, actually from all the failures I have had is when I actually learned the most. So changing that concept of failure towards it's actually a learning opportunity was something super essential in my life. And there was another thing that captured my attention, and it was about making your decisions, making choices, deciding for yourself. That's also super important, no? Like, it's funny that we go through most of our school years without taking many decisions, and then when we are 18, it's like, now you're free, now you can choose. It's like, wait, 1 second, I haven't practiced during all these years. So those
now to make some big important decisions, like what I want to do for the rest of my life, as if it's just one decision and then everything just follows, which
it also puts in the thing of living in the future, no? Because there is these decisions I have to take along my life to reach that concept of success, while I'm not actually living in the present, which anyways.
Yeah, lots of things to leave behind, but you're moving forwards and you're creating something new, and we're really excited to know more about that, because you're doing something very complicated, which is kind of keeping some of those core elements of the standard curriculum and then putting them together, merging them with 21st century skills, with holistic education, with respect for nature and culture as well. So we would love to hear more about how you're making this possible. What are the challenges that you're finding?
Should I go first? I think what's really interesting about the current curriculum that's out there is that the actual skills to sit exams are quite narrow. There are some skills that kids are learning, but essentially a lot of what they're learning is different knowledge. And the question of whether they retain that knowledge afterwards, I don't know how many the people cram knowledge into their heads, and some of it stays and some of it goes. But what's the value of retaining knowledge? That's one skill, right? To learn how to remember things, that's a skill. To learn how to sit an exam, learn how to work really hard, there's a skill that they're currently learning in terms of just sit down and apply yourself and have a strategy, like, okay, I've got to sit this exam, I'm going to have to learn all this information and regurgitate it into a paper. I feel a little bit like it feels a little bit like bulimia to me, where you stuff it all in and throw it up on a paper and then forget about it. It's more of a mental illness than a brilliant skill. I know I'm trying not to be rude about the current exam system, but I mean, it does show some things, and so it shows maybe that a kid has, or some kids have the ability to sit there under extreme stress and under a timer, and to write stuff and remember stuff and recall things, and to maybe read some things and to actually answer a specific set of questions. But it's really a game, and I think actually what Zach's doing is really interesting, because in teaching role-play games, he also teaches a lot of different board games too, and you're having to learn the game mechanics. So it's about really learning game mechanics and say, okay, this game requires you to do all of these things to win it, this game requires you to do all these things to win it. And game strategy is really fascinating, because that actually is one of the skills of passing an exam. Is like, well, what are the skills we need to, what are the game mechanics here to pass these exams? Because it's a set thing of, well, what do they want you to say? It's not like, because when you ask a question, there's a load of ways you can answer a question, and they can be quite tangential and quite creative and out there. And you know, I've seen some of those books like called F in Exams. I don't know if you've seen those books where they've got kids answering questions really creatively. You don't get the points, but it's pretty cool, and it's made the examiner laugh probably, because it's like, well, it's a brilliant, actually that is a good answer to that question. But you're not allowed to do that because you don't get the point, because it's what does the examiner want you to say. So it's learning a game mechanic. And what's crazy is that we have designed a whole education system around this just one game, and there's so much more to life than that one game mechanic. There's so many more skills to life, really. And those kids that aren't good at that one game are being told that they're failures, or being made to feel that they're failures. And I would suggest that that's unethical to make somebody feel like you're a failure just because you can't play that specific game. It's just like, what if they're brilliant in another game? And it's the old sort of idea of, well, you're judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree thing. It's like, if that kid is an amazing construction work, or whatever it might be. They might be a brilliant people person, and they're actually, their ability to empathize with people, their ability to work in a team, there is just, brilliant. They're so good at active listening. They're so good at compromising, or good at failing and then working through that failure and getting back up and keeping going. These are really important skills in life, and they're not being valued. And those kids that are good at those things, and that maybe find it really hard to sit an exam and to stuff knowledge in their head and regurgitate it in a stressful situation, they're not being valued, and that's a waste. It's a real waste, and it's causing a massive, and the more we go down this route of not valuing everyone for who they are and what they can do, we are not only alienating, we're causing a massive rise in that mental health issues, because there's a sense of lack of value. So yes, I don't know what the question was now, but I think it is a challenge, because with the as you say, we're lost in that system of valuing this thing because we can easily measure it. It's much easier to do exams and things that are, so it's all designed about what we can easily measure rather than what's of value. So we're valuing something very, very specific because it's easy to put it into an exam, and so what we're doing is a little more complicated. It is a more complex, because it can't be standardized in quite the same way. And this idea of making it fair is a really, really complicated issue, to make everything fair, because life isn't fair and people don't come from the same place. So they're not all facing that exam from the same point of view. So it's currently not fair. Some kids are sitting that exam having had tutors, their own bedroom, their own computer. They've been at private school where they've got a lot smaller classrooms, and some kids don't have access to the internet, don't have their own space, are caring for their family member. They just don't have that support to part, and yet they're being judged. Those two kids are being judged by the same criteria, and the same with schools with their different cohorts. And so what's fair in that? And this idea of standardizing us all, it's an illusion. It's an illusion that it's fair, and you're still also there's always some subjectivity whenever an examiner is marking. Like, I've been marking papers in schools, and there's the grade thing says, if they just say the word light, this to this answer, you can't give them a point. But if they put it into a full sentence, you can give them a point. So a kid might have just written light when they needed to say, you could use light in this situation. They get a point for using the full sentence. They don't get a point for using the word light. And so, do you know what I mean? It's very, and so what if they just said, you could use light? Well, is that a full sentence? Is that, you know what I mean? And there might be areas where it's just on the edge, and one examiner would give you a point for that, and one might not. So there's still always subjective until it's done by an algorithm. I don't know. It's so complicated that what we're suggesting is we start trusting teachers a bit more. And you have to trust a teacher and their relationship. You can have some kind of standardization where you bring in external examiners to check out the school. I mean, as long as it's not Ofsted in the way it is in England, where it's so kind of like, it's, I don't know. I mean, all of it's been designed to try and be fair, and trying to be standardized and make it fair, and in doing so, they've actually made it really unfair unintentionally. It's, I don't know, how would you describe that, Zach? I'll pass it to you.
Well, to pick up where you started as well, is that systems thinking is a way when we give opportunities, or we guide opportunities, or we create mentorships where learners have an opportunity to, again, see a lot of different mechanics about the way things are set up. When they do go into the real world, and again, if they can be playful, if we can be playful about what we're teaching and what we're bringing, not to make everything into a game, or just that everything is about being happy. But as Rosina said, there's a lot of life isn't fair, right? But it's not so much about whether you fail or whether you succeed. It's more how you take your failure, how you take your success, what you do with it. And what we find is that if we create situations where there's a lot of different opportunities, especially through games, but also through project-based learning, when we make projects, when we make prototypes, when we make things and we see things don't work as we were expecting them to or hoped that they would, at first, especially with younger kids, well, it sort of depends on the age and it depends on the child who shows up, but on what their background is. But the more that they realize that when things don't work the way that they want, and if we give them the right and proper support, they can come up with another way, or they can come up with a creative solution. And it's about creativity. And ultimately that leads to story. I think it's also about our story. What is my story? And every child and every person in this world has their story. And when we can connect them to narrative, and then we can connect them, and games is a great place. So you can just play board games, which is where you can get mechanics. But when you play role-playing games, for example, and when you do project-based learning, you get the story of something. You get the story of what came before, and you get the story of what's happening now. And you also can kind of put in your mind the future, what that can look like. And so there's a lot of what I would also call connoisseurship and figuring out skill connoisseurship. So what skills are needed? And what's, of course, very interesting with any child when they're trying to learn something is that there's certain people that know a lot about something because it could be that it's learned, but it also could be about its passion. And that kind of leads us to teachers. So teachers and inspiring teachers, because so many teachers we find are also uninspired, depressed, or under, again, if teachers have to figure out, how I'm grading, what I'm grading, who I'm grading, what they're doing, it's all these rubrics, it's all this pressure. We have to make sure that our kids succeed. There's all this pressure that's being put on the teachers. And we have, a dropout rate of not only students, we have a dropout rate of teachers. We have super skilled teachers who are leaving their profession because there's so much pressure for them to perform. So a big part for us as well is not just offering something different for kids, but offering an opportunity for teachers, offering them an opportunity to also, instead of feeling like they teach knowledge, that they can be mentors of skills. And this is a big part of what we're also bringing.
Maybe you can tell us a bit more about that, about how the role of the teacher changes with this new curriculum that you are developing.
Well, we have, at the core of what we're doing, there's social emotional learning and there's project-based learning. So what we're trying to do is make sure that there's an opportunity for the teacher to feel themselves validated. And when the teacher is validated and inspired, well, then of course they're modeling what it feels like, and then with the project that they're building with the students, or they're co-building or co-creating, it's about co is in so much of what we're doing, and this is really inspiring to the students and to the teachers. Is this opportunity to kind of find new ways of doing things. There's so much inspiration from, if it's set up right, there's as much inspiration possible for the teacher and the mentor as there is for the student. And that reciprocal relationship, that kind of feeding off of each other's inspiration is the dynamic that we're trying to build. And that's exciting. That's the real thing right there, is the excitement behind the learning. And it's not so much about teaching, but guiding, because if it's set up right, there's just constant learning all the way around. And if you're setting up your workshops or classes or projects in such a way that it's open and there's enough co-creativity there, then you're constantly receiving all this really interesting new information and feelings and embodiment and things that the learners are bringing that inspire the teachers to try new things as well, because that's really what it's about. And then then it's about the risk. You know, it's about teachers taking risks, and it's about students taking risks. It's like, what can we try to make? What can we try to do? And again, we're putting it to the learners, like, what do you want to try to do? What could we learn? What inspires you, or what's interesting to you? And in our domain, or in our power, or within, you know, whatever our frame is, how can we set up a frame where you feel safe and you can explore? And then we can be inspired by what you're thinking about. And then we can say, and what about this? And we basically, it sets us up in a situation where we can keep asking questions, and then they're going to ask us questions. It's almost like, it's like questions and questions and questions. And it's an exploration of where those things can go. That really,
I think it's like, is it Vygotsky's zone of proximal development? When we looked at that, it's his whole theories on learning. I really love that idea that students can do so much more when they do it with an adult that they're working in modeling. And so it's not leaving them completely alone and just standing there and instructing them, but we work together on a project. And what's exciting for teachers in what we're building is that the teacher gets to learn stuff alongside. So you explore that, we're presenting projects, and teachers can go, okay, this looks fun, let's learn this. What are we learning today? So we're presenting, we're creating all the teaching resources and the student resources to really send them on a journey of inquiry as a group. And so that includes the teacher. And I think that's what's exciting, because then it makes it, because otherwise you're just delivering the same old stuff all the time. And yes, that might feel safe as a teacher, but actually, if you start valuing teachers for their whole human being that they are, and all their different interests, you might have a teacher that loves teaching science, but also loves art and music, or that they might like fishing, or there's all sorts of different things that they could be interested in. And it's the same with kids. It's if we can start being more transdisciplinary and more exploratory as we learn, that you might go off on a tangent. And for example, we've had a space theme this term at Empathy in Bali, where Zach's teaching, and we are teaching a project which is about the ceremony, celebration and rites of passage. And it's really interesting, because you'd think, well, one, how's that related to space? But we had conversation with the kids that not only took celebration and looking at ceremonies and celebration to space, but it also took us to colonialization. And it's really fascinating, because when you start exploring with kids, you're just like, okay, so we have our calendar, even a birthday, something like a birthday, we celebrate that every year. What's a year? How many days in the year? How do we come up with the days in the year? Where's the calendar come from? Okay, that's how many times the earth is passing around the sun. What's a month? That's the lunar cycle. So there's space for you in that context of a celebration, an annual thing. And then it's like, well, why do we have Christmas and birthdays in some, do all cultures celebrate that? Does every culture have the same calendar? Because there's the Chinese calendar, and then there's the Mayan calendar, there's different calendars. So why do so many cultures all have the same calendar? Well, then there's colonization and the Europeans taking their calendar and their ceremonies and their celebrations out around the world. And you suddenly find that you don't have to stick within your little, I can't teach that because that's just my subject. In projects, you can discover all sorts of directions to go in, and you can bring in every single subject. And so therefore, as you're saying, it makes it way more exciting, I think, for teachers, because they're learning too. And then the kids don't feel like they're being dictated to, because it's a journey together. You're going on a journey together, and you're there to support that journey. It's facilitating, isn't it?
I think that also solves one question that many people ask, like, if you leave the kids to decide what they want to learn, how are they going to learn? Maybe you have to present them with all the different options in the world. And it's like, well, actually everything is related. Like, the weird thing is that we have divided into subjects and then we cannot cover, but you explained it really well. Like, everything it's related to everything. So you can go to whichever your interest and your passion takes you. And that's the beauty of learning. So yeah.
And something a question that comes to my mind, considering that you're kind of combining it with the curriculum, at the end of the day or the year, do you check with the kind of the standard curriculum, or do you match that with the different projects, or how do you, because in a way I see that you're making a transition, right, from a model that is based on content to one that is based on skills and abilities and passions, and in between we need this kind of connection so that people feel at ease that yes, the kids are learning to add and subtract and things like that. So how do you connect those two worlds at the moment?
We've basically coded the whole of the UK national curriculum in a crazy effort to make sure that we include as much of that as we possibly can. So we went from age 4 to currently age 16. And we've looked at every learning objective from every subject. We've coded them, and what we're doing is we build all the projects. We're just making sure that we cover every bit of content. It's not every single bit of content. We're also looking at it. I mean, it's the majority of it and so we wouldn't want students right now to go through our curriculum and then not be able to sit the current standard exams. So the idea is that they could still sit the exams if they want to. We're working towards a different assessment system, but right now, as you say, we're in a hybrid model, and so we're building it so you could just take we have 5 project pathways where we've found that we can fit all the curriculum in. Each one of those pathways is transdisciplinary, but they kind of lean in more direction that in certain subjects than others. So we have food project, which is looking at global food production as well as local food production and what the kids can and also nutrition. So we look at, well, what makes a nutritious, sustainable and ethical meal, right down from, well, what if I designed the school lunches or I designed a menu, what would it need to include, because I need that in my body for functioning, but also what can I grow, what can I grow in this climate, what soil do I need, what temperatures, what grows next to each other, what's permaculture, what's organic food, what's GM food. Then start looking at local farming practices. What are the future of food securities? What are the issues around food and soil depletion? What are then, if I was ordering food and I had to order it from abroad, what's the carbon footprint of that? What are the issues around the social and environmental impacts of food production in different parts of the world? And what's fair trade? So when you start looking at food, that's just one part of it. Then it's how do we cook it and the chemical transformations, and then there's how do we serve it and the customer, not just to a customer, but in terms of a family and as a society and a culture, and the tastes and the smells, and learning the curriculum right through all of our different senses. But then it's how do we clear that away too, and how does it get, what's the waste, and how do we upcycle, how do we compost and deal with food waste, and so just in that one thing you've got biology, chemistry, geography, maths. That, I mean, just you can see as you start to look at that when you go on a theme. So that we have enterprise and civic projects which cover like industrial design, engineering, robotics and coding, company structures, product design, interior design, that type of thing, and looking at kind of civic projects that they could do, looking at apprenticeships and things like that, to working with local companies. And then we have a production pathway. The production pathway is producing an event. So that might be a fashion show, or it might be a music gig, or a film, a documentary, an exhibition, a science exhibition, or an art exhibition, or so it's an events management thing, but they learn the theory, they then have the skill of making whatever it is, and then they put on the event. We have the multiverse games where they do role play, and there is, within the role play, there is history, so we're going in through portals into different moments in history and I mean, I should let Zach but it's amazing because we can take what not only are they working as a team, so there's this sense of you can go into any character. So okay, I'm going to be the warrior today, or I want to be the ninja, or I want to be the rogue, or whatever it might be. In these different, we're looking at archetypes and characters. So there's loads of English, obviously, in that, but there's also what we are doing in terms of the national curriculum is just making sure it's not too colonized, if that makes sense, because it's saying, well, what's an archetype in the UK might not be an archetype in China or in sub-Saharan Africa or in Colombia or wherever. So it's we're also questioning and being aware the whole time that any fact that comes out of the national curriculum is, well, what perspective, where's the bias in this information, and where's that coming from, and is it the case everywhere? So we're constantly putting that question to everything that we're teaching. And also even like scientific facts, it's like, well, scientists in the West are currently finding, or wherever it might be, currently believe this because this is what the evidence suggests that's been done. And I think that's important to teach kids, that it's about what we've found so far and what the collective knowledge of humanity has found so far in certain areas, that we're building on that knowledge, and that there's still things to learn, and that they could come up with new knowledge and they could discover something new. It makes learning more exciting and fun if you think, well, I could have an impact, because if I go and dig up a whole load of bones somewhere, that maybe I could change the whole theory on evolution, and it just keeps it open, doesn't it? And anyway, I'll let Zach come in on that.
And you can add on to the, because I know you have the different project pathways. I now understand how you connect them with the standard curriculum through, I imagine, hours and hours and hours of work of understanding all those objectives. I'm really curious about the personal exploration projects as well. If you can give us some examples of what kids are currently working on.
Sure. So yeah, the personal exploration project is a place for somebody to figure out what they want to do, or what they want to make, or what they want to get better at. These are all, we take them through a process that allows them to explore and even to consider, and we really try to pull it out of them. What are things that you think about? And so one thing, of course, is that it's igniting how much value we believe that they have, right? And then we're saying to them, we want to help you figure that out. We want to help you explore, and it's okay. We're going to try a bunch of different things. And what's very interesting is that out of the personal exploration project come the things that each individual wants to do. And that could be as simple as, I want to decorate my room, which is, that's something at home that's personal, but maybe it's, I want to sing better. These are all, I'm giving you ones that have come up this year. Or I want to know what happens when you die. Or I want to learn, I want to make a guitar. Or I want to grow my own garden. I want to learn or get better at dance, or I want to learn about crochet, or, it's a lot of things that have to do with, about skills. What it comes down to is it's kind of skills learning and knowledge. So that actually is where we see hand in hand knowledge and skills kind of coming together, because we have to explore, what do people already know? What's the edge of what the learner knows? And then, of course, not when you offer something like that, it's like, well, how much do I know about that? And I can admittedly say, well, there's certain things I know, and then there's other teachers in our school. And this is, again, the kind of spirit of Teacher Gamer, is the idea. I might be a teacher gamer in the sense that I like role-playing games, but the idea behind Teacher Gamer is like, what do you like to do on your own as a teacher that you could bring in and could bring value to what's happening? What either cultural thing or personal thing that you have a background in that you can explore and share, or at least draw from, even just in your own personal life. You can draw on the passion, because that's also very interesting for students to learn that well, interestingly, you know, teachers have passions outside of school, you know, and kids are always very curious, right? But also to bring this back is that no matter what the project is, whether it's food production, multiverse games, enterprise, or personal exploration, there's constantly math and there's constantly writing. And that math is always got measurement, it's always got scale, it's always got budget. Somewhere in there's going to be, and then of course, all of that leads to science and physics and geometry and algebra. I mean, these things come all the time. You can't get away from it. And if anything, when I say budget, I want everybody to know it's not just about money. It's budget of how much time is it going to take? What materials is it going to take? It might be just about bartering for those things. It might be about what materials you can find locally. And then also can be a big question about what is again, the carbon footprint is such a big thing. You know, what can we do locally? And to give you an example of a personal exploration project that happened last semester was that there was somebody who wanted to figure out how to make a vegan burger. And so it became an interesting thing because it was like, oh, this is something that we could all do in the kitchen and we could all learn about. And an interesting thing happened where one child said, well, we should just have vegan burgers for us in the middle school. So I'm the director of middle school at Empathy School, and we call it Empathy Middle School. And so some kids were saying, one kid in particular says, well, it'll just be for us. We're just going to make them for us. And then another one's like, well, why would we do that? Why don't we share it with everybody? And then I just kind of pulled back and watched as they debated about, you know, about this, whether they would keep it exclusively for themselves or if they would include others. And actually, at the end, it was unanimous that they wanted to include everybody. And then the next thing was to figure out, wow, there's all these materials we would have to get from outside. And then we learned that, well, how could we locally source it? How could we be responsible to make it? And so then we got a local chef who does things that's pretty much what we would call seeds to table. And we went and we brought her in, and she helped us create a vegan burger from local materials. And then once we tasted it and agreed on what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, and how we could make it better, eventually we offered it to the whole school. So one day we took over the kitchen with the cooks, and we actually then also helped to teach the cooks how to make the vegan burger so we could do it again in the future. And we had 100 people that we feed every day at school. And so we offered 150 vegan burgers because we knew some people would want more than one. And all of them were eaten, and it was a super success. But it took all the math to actually make it happen, even though what we were talking about is food. We had to figure out how we were going to feed 100 people with all those materials. And the other thing I just wanted to bring is writing. You know, writing is the massive skill that we need all the kids to know how to do, because writing is what we do informally, formally, creatively. This is something that we do in proposals. So again, with projects, and we're trying to get, you know, when we're going to do a project either together or we're going to do a project on our own, we need things, you know, in our projects, we're going to need to maybe ask for things. Depends how big the project is, what is the scale of the project? So the ability to propose. And then of course, when you learn about where people have gotten things so far, you're doing all sorts of annotation, right? You're really taking notes about what currently exists and what do I want to make happen. And ultimately, you know, through writing, we learn a lot about, again, I'm going to come back to it, story. And story is a lot about metaphor. And so these are like the constant things that are across every single project. These things are constantly there. And the idea is that we're modeling and guiding the learning process so that they become really inspired. And eventually, when they want to learn something, they know all these different steps that they can take. And they know, you know, where they can find a mentor, where they can find information, how they can go about scaling something, you know, what it's like to create a materials list, and on and on. It's just it's quite well, we're just trying to provide a way to see proceed. Well, you know what? And the other thing too, sorry, just to pull it back, is that it's a procedure, but we don't talk about it like a procedure. We just talk about it like, what do you want to do? What do you want to make? What's it going to take? And sometimes there's a little bit of moaning and groaning, like, oh my gosh, we have to try to figure this out. But it's like, okay, well, what happens when we do figure out, and and the idea behind the project is when things happen and they see it, it's just really exciting, you know, and whether it's when you're growing something or building something or exploring something or seeing yourself in the game world, for example, like you're kind of moving a story forward and you're doing something with others. There's a lot of failure that happens. And then when you succeed, and especially in games where you collaborate, and the big part of role-playing games is it's collaborative. So your whole team is trying to overcome puzzles or challenges. And when you do it together, that's where you get this dopamine, you know, this real dopamine hit from learning, you know, and then, or being together or doing something together and succeeding. And it's because you overcame all the struggles and the challenges and the failures, and then you got it right together. And then the celebration of getting it right is so strong. And I think about it, the kind of thing like when you're in a team, and not everybody does team sports, but at least it's something I did as a kid. I played soccer and volleyball at school. And it's like when you're coming home on the bus and you're retelling the story. Remember when this happened, and then this happened, and then, oh, that was terrible, but then this happened, and you're kind of reliving that. And the kids, you know, that's again their story, and the story is mostly about providing, you know, the opportunity to overcome the challenges, to overcome the failures, and to find successes so that they feel ready to try something new.
No, that's wonderful. I love the concept of the story and how it links together all those different pieces with reality, with their lives, and with meaningful learning. It's really staying with them after that, just remembering how everything happened, how meaningful it was for them. We're reaching the end of our conversation, and I would like just to know, for people that are watching us, where are you at your project? Where are you heading? And if anyone is interested, how can they reach you?
That's a good question. Well, we're obviously with Zach in Empathy School, so we're running our whole curriculum at Empathy, all 5 project pathways and B time. It's all going on there. That's in Bali in Indonesia, and then we are starting a pilot in January in Bermuda as well at Chatmore School, and we are building a hub in Cambridge in the UK. But basically, if you go on LinkedIn, and you can follow us on LinkedIn and on Instagram, Da Vinci Life Skills. And that's a good way to start. We have a website, davincilifeskills.com. But yeah, so at the school in Cambridge, we are looking to open a small hub, a learning hub. And that would be for next September, like August, September time, hopefully, if all goes well. And there's other places that we're beginning to look at, possibly in Singapore. And there's you know, as I said at the beginning before we started recording, it's kind of like going down water, and water going downhill, and seeing which doors are open and which pathways open up for us. And working on like the one in Cambridge, it's just finding the doors that open, and it's in different places in the world. It's just seeing where it goes and where people really want us to come. I mean, the places we're looking at, we've gone so far, and it's because we've been invited to come, and people have found our project and they want us to bring it to their school. So if you've got a school that that's like, oh, I completely believe in all of this and this is what I want to do, then that's the, you know, get in touch with us and say, yeah, we can bring our project. So basically we're licensing our curriculum, we're teacher training, so people can run it. The idea, well, run it, facilitate it, I suppose is a better way of saying it. It's mainly teacher training that I think we're really building here, because it's not so much the content, it's how it's delivered and how it's assessed that's key, and it's the value behind it, and it's the idea that not everyone has to be the top at everything all the time, and that's a really, really important part of the philosophy. So it's the teacher training side of that's really, really important. So we are going to be running a teacher training program where we've already started, where you can get a certificate for that training. And the idea is that you don't even have to go on to teach our curriculum, but you could go and teach project-based learning and formative assessment in any school that you would want to. But very much the key for us is that understanding of the value that all human beings have value, and that whatever it is they're good at, it's about finding that out and really supporting that every person to be the best they can be, and to not making people feel like failures, but allowing them to fail. Failure is good because that's how we learn, and that we don't all have to be the best at everything, because a society, and an amazing society, requires lots and lots of different people and lots of different skills and people to be good at different things. And that's where teamwork comes in and collaboration comes in, and instead of being competitive and pushing other people down in this whole kind of capitalist model that we're designed into schools of, like, I've got to be good and I've got to push everyone else down to be the best and be the top. It's, well, what if actually we need everybody to be the best community? And that's just a different philosophy. So we're really, that's what we're really fostering with what we're doing is yeah. So if there's anyone out there that's interested in getting involved in that, and we're kind of building we're calling it Biophilic Education. This umbrella of this term is Biophilic Education, which is, biophilia is the passionate love of life and all that's alive. And in design, biophilic design is building environments where human beings can thrive as a species. So this is really what we're taking, that concept to the next level in education, and saying, well, as a species, what do we need to learn? and what could education be if it was about us thriving as a species? And really, that's about community. It's about belonging and about working with each other, not against each other.
Yeah, I see that education can really transform society, because that's the seed of how we grow, how we learn to relate with each other, the ethical concepts, the morals, and the skills. I think so much could be solved by just learning really well how to communicate horizontally and empathetically with each other since we are kids, right?
Yeah, creating the vibrant community where every of us is a learner, and we can keep learning all the time and having fun. Sometimes we forget that learning is really fun.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we certainly have a lot of fun, don't we, Zach?
Yeah.
That's one of the best things about our schools, is that kids actually want to come to them. That's what the parents keep telling us, like, why kid just really wants to come to school now. It's like, yay.
Or just the parents wanting to come themselves. The parents are like, can I come? Yeah, so look out for soon we are going to be offering teacher training opportunities, and this is a really exciting, now that we really crystallize like what we're doing, and we're getting these pilots going. The next level is, as Rosina said, is that we would like to get teachers, out with us, and we actually run the projects with the teachers. That's part of it. We can do that at a school with the teachers and the learners. We can do it for the school, and the learners, but a great thing is that you can also come to our teacher training sessions, which will probably start this summer in 2023. And if you're interested, anybody out there, if you can't wait for that moment, and if you would like to check it out, I do have my little book here. You can check out the Teacher Gamer Handbook. It's got all sorts of pictures and diagrams and illustrations and all sorts of how-to things, lots of puzzles and strategies. It's really about strategies and involving kids and teachers in as much of the learning process as possible, in a playful way, with a lot of opportunities to collaborate and co-everything.
That awesome. Sounds amazing.
It also defines all the life skills in there, doesn't it? It's like got a really good collection of the skills we should be looking at.
There you go. 36 life skills.
Thank you very much, Zach and Rosina. I'm looking forward to keep co-creating these new realities in education.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having
It's
us.
been really lovely.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you.
Right.